Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co-hostess, Anna, and I'm here with...
Hey, Grieflings and Frightlings, it's Margaret, and oh boy, Anna, I just can't stop smiling. What are we talking about today?
Me either. I'm so excited. Today we're talking about one of my favorite musical artists. Can you guess who it is?
Who? Tell
Well,
me.
her last name is Riley, and she likes to smile a lot. That's right, we're talking about nothing short of Smile 2. We are going to talk about the original Smile a little bit too. We're going to try and do a 2-for-1 in this episode. So before we get started, let's talk about some of the triggers. Obviously, some gruesome, bloody violence, which if you're like me, you like that stuff. But if you don't care for it, you may want to skip one. Let's see, estrangement of friends and family, addiction, traumatic events in life, toxic relationships, narcissism. What else?
Ooh, mental health.
Substance abuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Substance abuse, mental health for both of them. The first one leans more, I think, definitely has more of like a trauma backstory than the second one. I don't think we get the same traumatic backstory like the first one.
I have to say I have a very opinionated view of the quote-unquote trauma story for the second one, so I can't wait until we get into that.
Ooh.
But that's the other thing too, is the second one, particularly the pressures of our everyday lives and our careers, because that is a trigger for a lot of people. So just keep in mind.
And it shows that.
Oh, absolutely.
So thank you for bringing that up. That's what I was thinking when I was watching. Like, this is like, she's just crumbling under the pressure of, and there is trauma. That's right. She has an abusive relationship and the trauma of if you haven't watched, listeners, go watch
it now, because we're gonna...
Thank you. Coming back to me now. It's all coming back to me.
Go watch it now. We're about to have a bunch of spoilers.
Chronic pain.
Yeah.
This movie delves into chronic pain too.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, let's get started. So, for those of you who are brave enough to enter our lair without watching the movies, just to give an idea, the general premise of the film series is essentially there's some sort of metaphysical entity that has the ability to enter your mind and your psyche as well as your body and kind of take over what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, almost in like a nightmarish or dreamlike state. At some point, once it has completely eviscerated what it needs from you as its host, it causes you to end your own existence in very creative and gory ways, typically in front of another human being, and then it finds its new host that way.
Yes. So another trigger warning. Suicide. Bloody, gory, like Anna was saying. This movie, for the parasite to be transferred, somebody has to die in front of somebody else. A lot of times it is suicide. The guy from the first movie ends up being hit by a car. So and it's going to take you out. So somebody witnesses it.
Absolutely. And Margaret brought up a really good point about how this kind of entity or metaphysical character is transferred. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and Margaret mentioned it's very similar to It Follows, which actually makes me kind of question if maybe they're in the same universe, kind of how like Jason Voorhees is in the same universe as Evil Dead, but we don't find out until like the 9th movie type of situation. So I'm wondering if they're coming out with that sequel to It Follows, if somehow they're going to interconnect the two.
Ooh, I really like that theory. I was thinking it's part of almost like this niche horror genre where it goes into a parasite, like a metaphysical parasite, because again, we were talking before and you brought up rain.
Mhm.
Again, this promise that there is something that is transferred by watching something, witnessing something, having sex with somebody, and then
Mhm.
what happens.
Absolutely. Well, and the transference is just a huge theme in both of the Smile films. I think when we're
Mhm.
looking at people who have experienced trauma, persons going through grief, loss, change, readjusting into general population society again, how often do we experience something traumatic or even a positive change? And the characters that are causing that impact or most directly affected end up impacting us as well. And then our behavior impacts the next down the line, and so on and so forth. So it is this huge domino effect.
Yes, and I feel like, I don't know about you, the second one,
Hmm.
really, as you had touched on earlier, like how pressure gets us, and then if we have trauma, how we start to feel like we're coming undone. We start to question our own sense of reality because our reality is a different experience from
Hmm.
someone who hasn't had trauma. If we have trauma, we can be hyper vigilant. Our brain is wired to look for danger. Where if somebody doesn't have trauma, they be like, "Oh
Hmm.
yeah, it's fine. I'm fine." Like if Anna has never been bit by a dog, and I've been bit by a dog, I might see a dog and be like, "Oh my gosh, it's snarling and it's drooling," and Anna would be like, "It's wagging its tail. It looks so happy." And so I feel like the second movie really showed Riley's just coming undone. And I think they did such a good job in the movie that at times I was questioning
Yeah.
what was
Yes.
her reality. What
Hmm.
like, is she hallucinating like the guy that comes to help her? Was he real? Or was he part of the smile?
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, and especially this scene with her mother in the private medical facility. I was just like,
Hmm.
yowza, like, did this really just happen? And then come to find
Yes.
out it didn't. But speaking of the mother, I mean, she is definitely the embodiment of what they refer to as a momager. Um, Very human capacity fulfillment oriented when it comes to her daughter and how she's performing.
Yes, and her concern about what others are gonna think, and
Mhm.
we've already done this, so where Riley couldn't, where Riley was like, I can't, this is too much," even how she has to keep
Mhm.
working through the pain, and that goes back to another theme we've seen this year that Blink Twice brought up, smile, this sense that as people we have to smile,
Mhm.
especially women will just smile your way through the pain, smile your way through whatever. And
Mhm.
that's what Riley kept being told, was like, from society, from her mom, will just smile. And then she was
Yeah.
terrified of
Oh
smiles.
yeah, and we recently talked about the substance too. I mean, even at the end when Elizabeth was, you know, trying to get rid of Sue, and Sue kills Elizabeth, and then, she starts to deteriorate quickly, but she's just smiling away when we know like her teeth are crumbling inside of her mouth. But and I think that showing in Smile 2 these scars on, our main protagonist body. Oftentimes, when you're going through grief, loss, change, it feels like you're walking around with all of these open wounds that are just seeping, but you're the only one that feels them or acknowledges them or even sees them or has any sort of awareness. Everyone else just sees a quote unquote whole person. Meanwhile, on the inside, they're just gaping emotional voids and these new feelings that are popping up and all of these different things going on that others can't see. And even if they could, it's questionable whether they would be able to understand or offer the support that might be helpful.
Thank you for bringing that up and touching on grief. And she has traumatic
Mhm.
grief. Her grief is, she survived a car accident with her boyfriend who died while they were in a fight, and they were in an
Mhm.
unhealthy
Absolutely.
relationship. And I feel this movie could be a whole metaphor for just the experience of traumatic grief.
Mhm.
And when we say, I'm not ready, in society basically is,
Mhm.
you have to, like, society's like, nope, you just have to
Yeah.
get back on the horse. You just got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, where we see poor Riley just unraveling.
Mhm.
She can't, like, what she went through was traumatic. And when we learn that, oh my goodness, that was
Well, and
powerful.
something when we see the full accident scene, because I'm like, oh my God, what a horrible person he was. And I'm thinking this halfway, maybe three-quarters of the way through the movie. He was wasted, he was driving, not paying attention, they get in this accident. Then we find out she actually grabbed the wheel. So I'm thinking to myself, technically speaking, she should have been prosecuted for man too, if you're looking at it
Hmm.
from the legal juncture of the situation, because she was under the influence, she grabbed the wheel. Technically, she caused the accident because she grabbed the wheel. And just looking at it, like, if I was talking to a colleague about this one day, that the judgment of public opinion is much different than the eyes of the law and legality. But when you look at survivor's guilt, not only does she have that, she also has the wisdom and acknowledgement somewhere inside of her that I'm the one that grabbed the wheel. No one else was around to bear witness, so it just looked like a regular car accident, I'm sure, when EMS came. But from all practicalities, one, how do you deal with the toxicity of the relationship? Two, you're a survivor from this accident. Three, you grabbed the wheel. Four, you both were probably just so intoxicated and inebriated beyond your minds that neither of you knew anything of what you really were doing, because the substances were taking over your behaviors. So that's a lot for an individual to be processing.
Yes, and I really appreciate how you bring up that part of traumatic grief of a perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
And she has to process that perfect storm, how everything came together. And even as somebody who works with trauma, I see that car accident as she's in an abusive relationship. She's not thinking the best. And so, right, our survival brain goes into, how do I survive this? I need to get out. And that part of our brain is going to make the decision that does the least amount of harm to the body. So she's in a speeding car. And so that part of her brain says, well, if I yank the steering wheel, I can get out of the car. It doesn't make sense. So often we want, like, our survivor brain to, like, be rational.
Mm-hmm.
It's
No.
not. It's like, how do I survive this with minimal harm to the body? This is primitive
Mm-hmm.
brain. And when it decides to do something, it doesn't invite the logic brain. So her brain was like, well, I'm using, and he's abusive. Let me appease him. And that also speaks to, everybody
Mm-hmm.
responds differently based on our experience,
Yeah.
based on our traumas. Somebody else might have started to fawn. Oh, baby, I love you. Please drive carefully, slow down. Somebody might have demanded that he pull over the car
Mm-hmm.
so they could get out. We can't compare our survivor response to somebody else's, because it looks different and we don't know how we will respond. And I love that in horror
Yeah.
movies, because we tend to see all of them: fight, flight, freeze,
Mm-hmm.
fawn. And then we could be like, oh, okay, would I have done that? Would I have ran up the stairs like this person? Would I punch them in the face?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and you're so right. And oftentimes, even how we'd like to think we would respond is very opposite of how we as individuals respond. So, quick anecdote: it is still the holiday season while we're recording this, and I run a lot in my neighborhood, and one of my neighbors decorates their home just to the nines. It's beautiful. People come from all over the town I live in to get to see it. It's just gorgeous. But some of their decorations are very realistic looking. And one night I was out running, and they have these retro vintage carolers that are about the height of, I'd say, like, young adults, so probably about 4.5 feet tall. They look very real. And so I'm jogging along, doing my thing, listening to music. And all of a sudden I see them and I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody's in the bushes. I literally put my dukes up and I'm ready to get into a fight with somebody if they try to accost me. In my mind, I always thought that I would scurry away in another direction,
Mhm.
but apparently not. Um, so that was surprising. And of course, as I got closer, I realized what it was and just started laughing hysterically. But yeah, I mean, that's just, it's a silly example, but you're absolutely right, Margaret. Like, we don't know how we're going to react or behave until we're in a situation that kind of grasps those baser instincts and urges them to respond.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's what she shows us. And we see her like going through this
Mhm.
repeatedly, even when she's giving the speech at the whatever the benefit
Yeah.
dinner, right? And she's trying to hold it together and
Mhm.
knocks over that poor old woman. That's what we do when we go into a panic state. We're not saying, oh, excuse me, get out of my way. Our brain is just, I need to get
Yeah.
out of here. I need to get to a safer space.
Mhm.
And she's not in therapy. She doesn't have any tools to help her be like, okay, starting to get activated. How do I leave? And that wouldn't have happened anyways.
Mhm.
Nobody in her inner circle was gonna honor that. I think of like Pedro Pascal, and I
Yeah.
think I've shared this example before in his social anxiety.
Mhm.
His inner circle know that if he like touches you,
Mhm.
he's getting anxious and he needs physical contact to help him
Yeah.
regulate his nervous system. And there's a wonderful video. I think he's in front of cameras with a co-star from a movie,
Mhm.
and you see him tap her shoulder and she just puts her hand out and he grabs it.
Mhm.
Riley did not have
No.
anybody like this in her inner circle. We talked about code words in
Mhm.
our grief episode. She doesn't have
No.
anybody to be like, banana pudding, and
Right.
they know to like rush her
Yeah,
off stage. She's
it's sad. Even
on her own.
when you think about like the topical business aspect of her handlers, right? Someone should have gotten her off of the stage. They're so concerned with appearances. Obviously, she's not behaving as herself. You need to remove her from the situation, if anything, to avoid something that impacts your financial and career future at all costs. And I hate putting it that way because that's not the way that I think, but just in terms of these characters that we're meeting in this movie, it seems like none of them have any concern, one, about her, like you said, and also even about their own positions. In some sense, they like to critique and tear Riley apart, but then they're not willing to do anything to kind of promote themselves or be active in their role. And
Yes.
that's really like
Ooh,
grief. I mean, when you think about it, it's like when you're grieving, how often are you in a situation where you feel like you're by yourself on that stage? There's this whole audience of people who have these expectations set for you. And then those are kind of the ones that you dealt with every day before the event, and you're dealing with them after. And then you're supposed to have, your supervisors, your directors, your family, those that are closest to you and quote unquote know you the best, yet they're nowhere to be found. They're either in that audience or they're backstage somewhere doing whatever they want, and you're left out to fend for yourself.
yes. Ooh, thank you. I love that. And as she's fending for herself, she, we don't know if the metaphysical parasite
Mm-hmm.
created it or if she created it. She needed a support. So then she creates in her imagination her best friend,
Yeah.
ex best friend, who they make up because she needs
Mm-hmm.
support. She needs somebody that's going to believe her, that's going to understand her ride or die.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I would like when I realized that that person was like made up,
Yeah.
I was so sad for Riley. I was like,
Too.
she needs a grounding person,
Mm-hmm.
somebody that's going to help her. And when she lost that, and then she gets, what's his name, Greg, she's like, okay, here's this other. And as you're talking about grief, And even in trauma, how those people, we search for those
Hmm.
people that can help ground us, normalize our experience, help us to feel okay that we're not losing
Yeah.
our mind. And sadly, the two people she had, one for, we
Yeah.
know one for sure was not real. The other one, I'm
Maybe.
thinking he wasn't
Yeah.
real because he pushes her in that thing and then we see her
Hmm.
out on
Yeah,
stage.
absolutely. So that was a lot of kind of the tricks of the, you know, being that had taken
Hmm.
over. And, just to backtrack for a minute about, the whole kind of metaphor of being on the stage and having the audience and those that you really need are backstage or somewhere offset. If you are listening to this and you identify with that metaphor, there are supports and services available to you. I guarantee you there are people out there who want to talk to you and want to help you and will take the time to help you in sorting out your experiences, your feelings, what is going to get you to where you wanted to be in the most healthy way possible. So please don't think that you are going to be on that stage by yourself forever. It may feel like the spotlight is just shining on you right now, but always know that behind that light, there's somebody operating the mechanics of it. So there's always someone out there, whether you realize it or not. And there are plenty of safe lines that you can call. We put them on our Instagram all the time. We always mention 988 every episode as well. Locally, there are a lot of supports and services. Also, your local hospice may have something that would be helpful to you, your local mental health association as well. So please look into those things. You don't have to feel like you're a solo act in a full room of people.
Yes, there's plenty of websites to find a therapist, inclusive therapist, therapy den. If money is an issue, Open Path Collective is an option. Check with your friends, ask around. There's a lot of ways that you can find somebody that's going to help you with what you're going through so you're not like Riley alone. And I checked my notes and the guy's name wasn't Greg, it was Morris.
Morris. Morris is a
Morris.
more that yeah. he looks like a Morris. Yeah,
He
he
does.
does. But yeah, and definitely you bring up friends too. Um, Make sure that you identify your safe friends, people that you can talk to about
Mhm.
anything in a very free, open environment. That's incredibly important, whether you're going through some sort of extreme experience or just your day to day routine. It's great to have safe people that you can talk to about anything and
Mhm.
everything.
Yes, and I feel like this movie did a really good job of showing when people don't feel like they have a safe person or how to convey. We think about her friend
Hmm.
who she gets the smile from, and we can see him unraveling and really that the fear in his eyes of like, I think I'm going crazy. I don't know if I'm going crazy. And that thing we do as people, that fear that if I reality check with Anna
Hmm.
and Anna does not validate or confirm my reality, then she has confirmed that I'm going through something. And we often don't want to know that. We often don't want to then have to deal with there really
Yeah.
isn't some creature in my space. So it's easier just to stare at the creature in my space and then smile at Anna and pretend like I'm okay, even if she's like, "What's wrong?" And I can be like, "I'm just stressed. There's just a lot going on." Then I'd be like, "Well, I really think there's a monster in my room." And Anna being like, "There is no monster." Going back to what Anna said,
Hmm.
our safer people are the people that go, "Oh, I don't see the monster.
Yeah.
You see a monster. How can I support
Hmm.
you? What can we do? Do you need to come with me? It's like when little kids are like, there's a monster under the
Yeah.
bed. And the parents like, no, let's check. Or I got the monster. If our brain is telling us there's something there, we need those people that help validate that that is our experience, even if it's not their experience.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And, one thing about the movie, the way it starts, the second one, I really enjoyed that. Um, it's so different than the first one. And I think sometimes when movies have sequels and then they become a series, there's kind of this expectation that it's the same formula. I love that Smile and Smile 2 are completely different formulas, but they still get the same point
Mm-hmm.
across.
Yes, I would you agree that the creator of both movies really took his concept, which was this metaphysical parasite, and then focused on the person it was impacting and in their life and how the
Mm-hmm.
parasite blended in with their life. Like you said, instead of, oh, we've got Jason, we've got Mike
Yeah.
Myers, here's the formula, being like, this is the
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's going to affect different people different ways because our first character is a therapist in a clinic.
Yeah.
So she's going through with a lot of
Mm-hmm.
trauma addicted mom who ODs. Riley is a superstar
Mm-hmm.
that has a stage momager.
Yeah.
So they would have different experiences.
Absolutely. And it's nice to kind of see both movies through the lens of the main protagonist. And that's hard to find really in any film genre. So it's really refreshing and nice to have that opportunity to do that. And I think that some of the characters we meet along the way in both movies, I don't know necessarily that we connect with them, but we're able to figure out what's going on. And we just talked about how the opening in the second one is so different. And immediately you kind of realize, okay, this guy's infected. He wants to find someone that he deems a real piece of garbage to give it to because he knows he's going to die. And then as soon as he realizes, oh crap, both of these people are dead, there's some random kid here, he's going to have it now. Immediately he feels remorseful. So you kind of already get this idea of his character and who he is. And it's like, oh man, that sucks that he got it. But I'm wondering, did he get it at the concert? Because even though it starts as the beginning, I want to say it said like X amount of time goes by or
He got it from the chick in the first.
oh, that's right.
He was with
That's
her.
right. He was
He
with
was trying to
her.
save her.
That's right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I didn't watch the first one right before I watched the second one. That okay. So then that's how that got started. I'm wondering how drug dealer Lewis ended up getting it though. Probably from that kid. That kid got it from the guy in the first one, and then he had to find someone else to get drugs from. So he went to drug dealer Lewis, and then drug dealer.
The kid that gave it to her?
Well, I'm figuring out the kid that gave it to her, how he got it. Because
He got
he
it
got
because
it
he
from the
witnessed
brother of the guy that.
from the first,
So,
the guy that went to give it to the drug dealers. He was there buying
mhm,
drugs and then witnessed them die. And then that guy left
yeah.
from the first movie. So that's how Lewis got it. He witnessed the murder of the other two guys.
See, I thought that he got it from the guy because he got hit by a car then. And then it
Mm-hmm.
transferred. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I think also he had interaction, which we don't know if like the male nurse was real or not. He had interaction with his brother because that's how he tracked down Lewis as well. So I'm wondering if he the brother to the guy in the first one. There's this whole like
Morris.
yeah, there's like this whole lineage that I'm questioning now because he said that I checked my brother's phone and that's how I figured out who Lewis was. I got there, Lewis was dead, and you're the last person he texts, is what he said to Riley. So I don't know.
Yes. But we don't know if Morris
Mhm.
is
Yeah,
actually
real. Yeah.
real or if it's the
Hmm.
parasite explaining to her what is going
Well, and
to happen. And I wonder if they did that because they wanted this movie to also be standalone so you wouldn't have to watch
yeah.
the first one to know. So then you
Hmm.
need a character that's going to explain what is happening.
Yeah. Well, and then also she has such a need for someone who's caregiving in her life that Morris kind of embodies that. Like, I know what's going on with you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to take care of you so you don't have to deal with this parasite anymore, right? So, once again, it's kind of a double entendre that they've got going on in the movie.
Yes, I wonder if it's the parasite evolving, and we'd have
Mhm.
to go back and rewatch the first one.
Mhm.
This time it feels much more insidious,
Yeah.
whereas like playing with her, like it knows that
Mhm.
she wants a caretaker, so it's going to help her manifest the
Mhm.
best friend. More as these people that are
Yeah.
going to caretake her to
Mhm.
almost as like, I'm going to give you this hope and then I'm going to rip it away,
Yeah.
which it did in the first one. And again, I appreciate that.
Mhm.
It does it differently. In the first one, the hope came from our main character's her ex-boyfriend, the
Yeah.
cop who dies in the second one, coming in and
Mhm.
solving it for her and trying to save her or help her save
And it
herself.
just dawned on me that's probably how he knew the dealers had that hiding house in the second movie because he's a
Mhm.
cop. Because I was like, how do you just
Yeah.
randomly know? But that totally makes sense. And I feel like the
Yeah. He
first
was a
one,
cop.
it's more centered around like trauma. I don't want to say caused by others, but trauma through life experience and maybe things that we don't ask for that we're born into. Versus, I feel like the second one, a lot of the trauma was the pressures of life and career and relationships and not knowing how to cope in a healthy way. So even the trauma was very different that at
Yeah.
least for me between the two films, especially you look at like I feel like they picked very specific archetypes for the second one. Like Lewis,
Mhm.
like he's a drug dealer. He's probably like got some other stuff going on the side hustle and maybe not like the type of person you want to take home to meet your family. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
then Riley, you find out. I think for me, the most jarring part of the movie was I feel so bad and so much pity towards her. And then I'm like, holy shit, you grabbed the wheel. So I'm like, well, I can't feel as bad for you because equivocally, you did kill someone at the end of the day. Um, so it's just kind of like to me, it's like they fueled each other. Neither of them could stop, and it escalated to a point where, depending on the eyes of the law, that could be considered domestic violence or, manslaughter. So, and once again, this is applying the eyes of the law. This is not applying public opinion, um, because at the end of the day, someone is dead. So I was just like, what the heck? And then I'm thinking, okay, you have this friend who apparently was trying to do everything they could to help you. Something transpired, right? So they're gone. They want nothing to do with you, even though the parasite has you thinking that they're back in your life. And it's really unfortunate. I feel like with Riley too, she could never just say enough is enough. Like, why would she consent to a tour? Where is her therapist? Where are her counselors? Where are the people from the rehab she went to? Because guaranteed, any licensed physician, counseling, therapy professional who had a client fitting into that genre and that archetype and all of that trauma would never say, okay, go back on tour tomorrow. Guaranteed. With no follow up, no additional therapy, no additional counseling, no other procedures or processes in place. That's what really blew my mind. I'm like, where did she go? Because this is not an SOP. Like, I don't understand what's happening here because they say she's only been
Well,
out for
she
a
has,
year. And at
yeah,
some point, typically you have a 12 to 18 month follow up plan. So I'm like, where?
you do, but that's on the patient. That's on Riley. So what happens when you get discharged is that program, unless you're staying in that program and you're being discharged to like an out of patient clinician that is with that program. Otherwise, the program says, okay, here is your discharge summary. You're going to follow up with your own therapist. And then Riley, let's say that she gets her own therapist. That therapist even has only so much power. They can talk about, is this a good idea? I don't think this is a good idea. Ultimately, it comes down to Riley has freedom of choice. She gets to make the decision. She could even say, you know what, you disagree with me, I fire you. So you bring up this very excellent point of, we don't have a system in place to catch people suffering from mental health, from addiction. You do one program and it says, okay, here you go. We'll send you out to the wild and we're going to trust that you're going to do what you need to do. And even Riley and her addiction, we see how complicated addiction is, how addicted people make decisions in an addictive mind frame that they would not make in a sober mind frame. So as you say, yeah, she grabbed the wheel. I still see somebody trying to escape a situation and feeling she had no other choice. If she was sober when she made that choice? We don't know. I also don't think her intent was to kill them. I think the intent was to get through to him, to change something. If she was truly in a domestic violence situation, we also know statistically that when somebody decides to leave, when they decide that they've had enough, that is when their life is in the most danger. So if he was abusive, we could guess that things were going to escalate and Riley was going to end up being more hurt. So it's very interesting how you see her, because I truly see her as a victim that just keeps getting beat down, beat down, beat down to where she's a shell of a person.
Yeah. Well, and they both were doing cocaine in the vehicle, so their judgment clearly was impaired. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, especially with a lot of things that are going on in United States society right now, it poses the question of public opinion versus the eyes of the law, because if you're applying the legal aspect, at the end of the day, someone is still dead. Like, he's never going to come back. He's dead. And I think that eventually this may be a question that we hear more and more in reality. Is someone's trauma more valuable than the loss of someone else's life? And I think that in my opinion, and I'm not legal counsel, I do not have any sort of judicial degree, so this is coming to public opinion, me being part of the public. I think that's something that would have to be handled on a case-by-case basis.
I agree with you. And we can't compare. We don't know the extent of trauma and what leads to it. And you're right, at the end of the day, she did take somebody's life.
Yeah.
And she's dealing with that.
Yeah.
Guilt. That's part of her isolation. That's part of probably why the smile parasite really liked her, because
she can't really, and she can't say like, oh, well, I'm struggling because this also happened in the car, because then she's, incriminating herself basically, because that's kind of why I bring up, like, the legal aspect is, if she says she grabbed the wheel, then she has incriminated herself. She's the only one that knows that happened, aside from the
and if she's doing therapy, she could process that as a clinician. If somebody tells me they murdered somebody,
disclosure. I mean, there's certain things.
I can't break that unless they're saying they're going to murder somebody. Then I can break confidentiality otherwise. Which is sad that she wasn't able to really look at that and then do what she needed to do. Maybe go ahead and tell the police what happened.
Absolutely. And if you're listening and you have been through something traumatic, or there's an experience that you were involved in that you are keeping on the inside, we've touched a little bit on disclosure and this other thing called privilege. When you're going into a situation, whether you're talking to an attorney, a physician, a counselor, make sure that you question what that means to them and where
Mm-hmm.
you're located, what that means for you.
Yep.
Because comfort is a
Yes.
big thing. If they're very opinionated, and obviously in most cases they're going to say this is, privilege between us, but I don't like salad with watercress in it, and your favorite thing in the world to eat is salad with watercress, and they're not comfortable for you, you can always go to a different professional as well.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, this was a heavy horror movie. A lot of horror movies are. Anna, who do you most relate to?
I should have written down his name, but her assistant, not just because he has great style and hair, but also I think a lot of the time, especially historically and most of my full-time gigs that I've had over the years, I tend to be kind of the caregiver, I guess you could say, role. So if something happens, I'm like running after my colleagues to be like, are you okay? Do you need anything? How do we get the show back on the road? Things still need to be done. What can I do to help you? And when he brings the sweater, because he's like, well, I thought you might be cold. And he's really trying to avoid chaos before it ensues in any way that he can. And I actually feel kind of bad for him because the mother and Riley, they have a very volatile relationship. It has to be extremely stressful working in an environment like that, 40 to 60 hours a week. So just, I think that I would identify most with him. What about you?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Him, yes. And like you said, like trying to caretake, trying to get ahead of it.
Mhm.
And even we see him trying to be a caretaker to Riley,
Yes.
and due to whatever we don't know, his dynamic with her mom,
Mhm.
he doesn't feel like a safe enough
Yeah.
person for her. And he's not able to get in her good graces, like you said, probably most likely because of his relationship
Mhm.
with her mom, and her relationship
Yeah.
with her mom is easier to see him as an ally
Yeah.
to mom. And I think in some point in the movie, mom makes that clear, like that the assistant
Mhm.
mom is the reason that he's around. So
Yeah.
really reinforcing to Riley she doesn't have any
Mhm.
allies.
You know what I was really hoping to happen though was the scene with the mom in like the private hotel when Riley kills her. I was hoping the assistant was gonna walk in and be like, "Oh my god, you killed our mom!" And then we find out that he's like her half brother, but that didn't happen. But that would have been a really great like shock in the movie. Like what? Because that would also explain
Yes. And
like
what
why
a
she didn't like
symbolic.
him. Because sibling rivalry,
Yeah.
right?
Ooh, I saw that scene as like symbolic, as like Riley killing her mom, reclaiming her
Mm-hmm.
independence. As teenagers, that's what we do with our
Mm-hmm.
parents. We don't physically kill them, but we create this distance so that we can say, I am my own person. I can make my own choices. I'm
Yeah,
independent.
absolutely. It's just really kind of fascinating how the Parasite kind of presented that. And um her at the end, I almost felt like her mom looked lighter than she had throughout the whole movie. Like her hair was more bouncy, she was happier, she was wearing brighter colors at the concert. So I was like, I wonder how much of that was actually her mother's personality and how much was the parasite that we saw too. So it's really hard, as you mentioned, for us to know what was reality versus what was the parasitic reality.
Yes. And that, I think that's what makes this movie so good, is because we don't
Mm-hmm.
know. We're left wondering, like you said, what is reality and what isn't
Yeah,
reality.
absolutely.
Yes.
Well, speaking of reality, hopefully you are enjoying the cast. If there are any movies that we've been talking about that you really enjoy and you want to see kind of further into that genre, please let us know. You're welcome to comment below, message us through Instagram or other means. And also, if you are struggling with your concept of reality, once again, there are supports and services available to you. And we will make sure that you can access those through our Instagram and other social media pages.
Yes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and
until next time, close those coffin lids and drink your bruja brew. We'll see ya.
thanks for watching and listening.